Aboard a early 19th century ship of the line in the British Navy, there were relatively few luxuries by today's comparisons. There were games and education and even smoking aboard ship. The smoking, though, wasn't allowed throughout the decks. It's generally not a good idea to have men striking up pipes, walking throughout what is essentially a floating bomb with all of the gunpowder and so on aboard. So there were relatively few opportunities for the men to actually enjoy a smoke unless something was actually allowed by the captain. One of the times that the men could smoke would be in the morning when the food was being prepared in the galley. If they were able to get into the galley, that was one of the few areas aboard the ship where fires would be allowed during the day. One of the few others would be the blacksmith's forge. So if that was up and you were friendly with the blacksmith and had time on your hands, you might be able to go and enjoy a smoke there. This particular pipe that I've got here is more typical of an American pipe. Most of the British pipes in this time are made entirely of white clay, with the stem there as well being made from it, not from a reed like this one. What happens with these socketed pipes is periodically you can replace the bowl. I've read somewhere that once the bowl got to this sort of state, or maybe a little bit beyond, the pipe would be thrown away and get another one. The amount of pipes being produced was astronomical, and there's a saying I've heard about archaeologists not being able to dig a square foot anywhere in the British Isles without running across a pipe or a pipe stem somewhere. They're all over the place. I was digging in my father-in-law's back garden, and we ran into, I think it was about half a dozen pipe stems in an area about as big as the table that you can see here. There's a few stories associated with the pipes. I've not been able to necessarily substantiate all of these. There's one, though, that I could well imagine folk from the Navy doing with either a broken clay stem from a pipe or from a reed like this, which I think works really well for this one, is you would get to the spirit magazine or to the rum ration before the master, and others were around it, and if you could find a knot in the wood of the barrel, you could take that, lift that knot out, and then take your pipe apart, or use a broken stem, I presume, and use it as a straw and get yourself a bit of extra rum or whatever the spirit was that was being used at the time. Now, it might seem unusual for a British naval vessel to have an American or more American style pipe on board, but these men were very well travelled. The ships were very well known throughout the globe at this time, in the tremendous beginnings of the Age of Empire for the British. And indeed on HMS Victory at the Battle of Trafalgar, as many as 1 in 10 men weren't native born to the British Isles that were fighting on there. I've heard somebody say that one of the reasons, one of the many reasons for the Revolutionary War with the Americas, the War of Independence, I think, was that we were pressing Americans into service, and they were supposed to have papers where they could say they were Americans and wouldn't be pressed into service, but we were ignoring that for one reason or another. So that might be a reason why you've got an American style pipe aboard ship, and also just trade in general. A lot of that going on. The tobacco from the period, I've got this little pouch, which is now going to fight me, won't let me open it. The tobacco from the period was generally came in these sort of card sizes. These are a bit ropey now. They're about the size when they turn up of a credit card. And those leaves are pressed there. And about one of those, this is about that sort of size, if I can pretend to make one from these. You've got one about that size. That will be crushed and pushed into the bowl, and we'll fill that bowl quite well and give you a nice smoke. And there's anecdotal evidence to show that because the sailors couldn't smoke wherever they wanted on board the ship for fear of explosion and setting things alight, they would chew the tobacco. So it wasn't actually a chewing tobacco, it was just a normal tobacco, which they would then chew. And I've read somewhere that what this often meant was a lot of the guys could end up coming up with sort of mouth and throat cancer. And some of the illnesses aboard the ships, where they talk about various things, could in fact have been throat or mouth cancers. So there you go, a sort of a small luxury item for men aboard a ship of the line in this time. Not one that they could use all over the place, so when you see it in the movies, they're all busy smoking around. They would have just been mortified at that. Certainly the gunner would have been having sharp words with anybody found smoking aboard a ship for fear of explosion. You really just don't want sparks and lit embers and so on from a pipe around gunpowder. It's really a poor idea. So there you go, just a few little bits and pieces based around the humble pipe of a sailor aboard a ship of the line in the early 19th century.